It was just past 9 p.m. when the flashing red and blue lights pierced the quiet suburban night, reflecting off the windows of a small cafe that had closed 30 minutes earlier. Mr. Elias Rowe, an elderly black man with a trimmed silver beard and a timeless calm in his eyes, sat quietly in his vintage navy blue Lincoln Town car, waiting patiently as a young white officer approached his window with the kind of aggression that stank of presumption. License and registration, the officer barked. Elias turned his head slowly. He spoke with a deliberate, dignified cadence. "Good evening, officer. May I ask what I'm being stopped for?" The officer, badge number 4471, nameplate reading C, Hanley, shifted on his feet, annoyed that his authority had been met with calm instead of fear. "You were swerving. Looked like you might be intoxicated." Elias raised a silver brow. "I haven't had a drink in over 30 years, officer." Hanley snapped. "License and registration. Now." Elias reached carefully into the glove box, retrieved his documents, and handed them over. As the cop walked back to his cruiser, Elias looked ahead, breathing slowly. This wasn't new. It hadn't been new since he was a boy. What was new was the anger simmering in the younger man's steps. Hanley radioed in a fake story. Slurred speech, glassy eyes, smell of alcohol. None of it true. Then he opened his trunk and began assembling a small bag of evidence. A nearly empty whiskey bottle with Elias's fingerprints from a coffee cup he had discreetly lifted during the stop, a torn paper bag, and an open prescription bottle conveniently missing its label. It was the oldest trick in the book. But Hanley didn't know who he was dealing with. "Step out of the car," Hanley ordered, hand already on his holster. Elias complied, slow and steady. "You're under arrest for DUI and possession of controlled substance. Hands behind your back." "For what?" Elias asked calmly. Hanley smirked. "You can ask your lawyer." As the handcuffs clicked shut, the old man didn't protest, didn't plead, didn't raise his voice. Just closed his eyes and whispered something under his breath, something like a prayer, or maybe just a reminder to himself. Stay steady. Stay righteous. The precinct was dim and buzzing with tired officers. Elias was booked without resistance, though several staff exchanged looks. Some recognized his face, unsure from where. One older sergeant raised a brow at Hanley's report, but said nothing. He'd seen this kind of fabrication before, but knew speaking up would only derail his nearing retirement. In the holding cell, Elias sat straight, untouched by the shame meant to break him. He asked for one phone call and dialed a number by memory. "Ben? It's me. They finally did it. Come get me." The next morning, a sharply dressed younger black man in his 30s with dreadlocks and a leather briefcase walked into the precinct. "I'm Benjamin Rowe, counsel for Elias Rowe. I need to speak to my client immediately." The desk officer glanced down at the logbook and froze, then looked up again. "Did you say Elias Rowe? As in—" "Yes," Ben said coldly. "As in Justice Rowe, Supreme Court nominee, confirmed by Senate Judiciary Committee last week." Whispers began to ripple through the precinct. When Hanley came in for his shift and heard the news, he turned pale. "You mean that Elias Rowe?" he asked another officer. "The constitutional law guy?" "Yep. You just planted fake evidence on a man set to sit on the Supreme Court." Hanley broke out in a cold sweat. Elias sat in the dim holding cell, upright and unshaken, his presence calm but powerful. When Benjamin walked in, the guard didn't dare make him wait. They unlocked the door without a word. "Dad," Benjamin said softly, placing his hand on Elias's shoulder. "I told you not to come until morning," Elias replied, cracking a smile. "Didn't want to ruin your night. You think I slept?" They sat down across from each other, separated by a chipped metal table. "They planted it, didn't they?" Ben asked. Elias nodded. "The bottle, the pills, lies, all of it." Ben clenched his jaw. "We'll handle this, but we do it your way. Dignity, restraint, and the truth. Always," Elias replied. "I didn't survive Selma to lose my soul anger now." News spread fast, first in whispers, then in headlines. Supreme Court nominee arrested in DUI scandal. Controversy surrounds black nominee after evidence emerges, Rowe faces scrutiny before confirmation vote. But by the second day, conflicting reports began surfacing. Surveillance footage from a gas station Elias had stopped at minutes before showed him walking perfectly straight. A store clerk attested he only bought coffee and tipped well. Then came the kicker. An anonymous precinct staffer leaked a body cam still showing Officer Hanley opening Elias's car door and placing something inside. The media began to pivot. Was this setup? Cop under fire for possible framing. Did racism almost derail a Supreme Court career? Inside the police department, panic stirred. Officer Hanley sat in the Internal Affairs interview room, sweat dripping down his temples. "You sure about the evidence?" the investigator asked flatly. "Because Mr. Rowe's record is pristine. Civil rights attorney. Harvard Law. Handled cases in front of the Ninth Circuit. Hell, he wrote the opinion that overturned the Kendrick execution bill." Hanley swallowed hard. Maybe I made a mistake." "Mistake?" The investigator leaned in. "Or a felony?" Ben filed a motion to dismiss the charges within 48 hours. The judge, an old colleague of Elias, granted it without hesitation. But Elias didn't stop there. He requested a public inquiry. The courtroom filled with press, activists, law students, and citizens who had followed the case with growing unease. When Elias took the stand, not as the accused, but as a witness to systemic rot, you could hear a pin drop. He told his story without embellishment. Just facts, with that same quiet strength that had carried him through decades of racism, litigation, and precedent-setting cases. "I was not profiled because I was drinking," he said. "I was profiled because I was black, because I was old, because I did not bow to fear. And someone like that, to some, is dangerous." He paused, letting the weight settle. "But what frightens me more is how easily my life could have been destroyed if I hadn't had a law degree, a son who practices law, and the eyes of the world on me. What about those who don't?" Officer Hanley was fired within the week. Internal Affairs recommended charges of evidence tampering and false arrest. He faced prosecution and became a national symbol of law enforcement arrogance gone unchecked. Elias, meanwhile, returned to the confirmation process. And when he walked into the Senate chamber to face questioning, the air was different. The senators no longer looked at him like a token nominee. They saw the steel in his spine, the restraint in his fury, the voice of thousands silenced too soon, speaking through him. Senator Cruz, usually one to oppose liberal nominees, said only one thing: "You have my respect, sir." And my vote. The final vote was 83-17. Elias Rowe became the first formally incarcerated person, however briefly and unjustly held, to sit on the U.S. Supreme Court. On his first day at the court, Elias passed a janitor in the hallway, a young man, Latino, no more than 22. The janitor nodded respectfully, eyes wide. Elias stopped. "You good, son?" he asked. "Yes, sir," the man stammered. "It's just, I saw what they did to you, and then I saw you win." Elias smiled. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about repair. He walked on. And in that moment, in the quiet halls of a building that had once upheld slavery and segregation, something shifted. Not everything had changed, but something had, because dignity, once publicly denied, had been restored, and justice had shown its face, even when it wore an old man's body, even when it had to fight back from a cell.